This is The KJ Show. The KJ Show with host Dr. Katherine Johnson is a mix of breaking news and practical advice on the many ways in which the energy industry can affect you and your family. Katherine will combine energy updates and conversations with leaders in the energy efficiency community. So please welcome your host, Dr. KJ.
Hello and welcome to the KJ Show. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson, your host, and today I am talking about something that is not too surprising. Guess what? Solar energy's out, natural gas and nuclear power are back. And that is because solar energy is basically not economically feasible. I could have told you that 20 years ago. Anyway, but I always like to start with something fun. And so I have the breaking news that you can't make up. Now, it's a sort of a surprise to me, but there's this group of states, primarily in the Mid-Atlantic, called RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and they basically band together and either impose a fee or a tax and raise money in a way that they then use to offset climate emissions. Never really quite understood how it works, and apparently Pennsylvania doesn't either, because Pennsylvania is now pulled out of their RGGI agreement as part of a way to make the budget more in tune and balanced. So they've had a fight over this membership for a long, long time. And RGGI is the way that Maryland, in the state I used to live in, does all kinds of funding for different programs. So to me, it's kind of like almost a tax that you have to pay. You don't even know you're paying it. You're part of this initiative. You don't even know you are. Another sneaky scheme. But now advocates, of course, are saying, oh, it's a blow to climate change and it's really bad. But the Pennsylvania lawmakers voted to stay out of RGGI that cuts carbon emissions from power plants. And it's basically been an ongoing legal battle for since 2019, when the governor just said we're going to be in RGGI and didn't ask the legislature. So that was a sticking point. Is that a law? Can the governor do that? Is it a tax? So that's been the debate for the last few years. But it's a collaborative 11 Northeastern and Mid-Atlantic states that would have reduced, according to advocates, climate damaging emissions if they'd become an active member. Now we all know that the climate damage emissions aren't as bad as we thought so, right? So 5 months after they passed this $50.1 billion budget, that would have been voted into law, the RGGI said, no, we're not going to include RGGI. And the reason they're not going to include it is because they have to fund other priorities. Guess what? Education and transportation have been cut in order to fund RGGI. And if RGGI is supposed to raise money, I never really quite got how it's costing them money. But anyway, they said that the RGGI membership would have reduced the electric emissions by 84%, maybe. But implementing a RGGI membership doesn't necessarily lead to cuts in emissions. And it also has a little effect on retail electric prices, wouldn't cut coal use, and would maybe encourage the uptake of renewables, but maybe not. The Consumer Energy Alliance has been opposed to this RGGI membership for quite a while, and they said that getting out of RGGI means Pennsylvania can better compete for data centers, advanced manufacturing facilities. In other words, they can be competitive and energy investments, because what they do is by having RGGI, you're increasing the cost of doing business in the state because you're adding additional taxes or fees. Since 2005, 10 other RGGI states have cut power emissions by 50% faster than all the other states. So they say that there's some good with RGGI, but it's been blocked by litigation because they said it was a tax, not necessarily a fee, and basically Pennsylvania's out. I think we're going to see a waterfall effect in other states as they become more interested in having becoming cost competitive. Like Maryland is trying to be cost competitive, and it isn't. Virginia is, and I don't think Virginia is part of RGGI. Kind of an interesting twist. Another really breaking news, you can't make this up. And my Substack, which was supposed to go out yesterday, is going to go out tomorrow. I don't know why. Technical glitch, I guess. But my whole Substack, and you can get it at my Substack. You can go to my website, johnsonconsults.com, and find it and then subscribe there. But the interesting thing is I did a whole thing about COP30 being the Conference of Parties being basically a cop out, and they really didn't cheese anything? Yeah, go ahead and put up the first picture of this was Reggie. This was the Reggie electric transmissions that are supposed to cut emissions and may or may not cut emissions, and basically just another way to sneak taxes onto us poor citizens. But let's go to the next slide, because this has to do with the Amazon forest, which is where they held the COP30 um, event. Now, a couple last 3 years, it's been held in Saudi Arabia or UAE, fossil fuel center places. This time they decided to move it to Brazil and have it in this Amazon area, which they ended up cutting down trees and trees, lots of trees, and cut off all kinds of residents and basically destroyed their crops, and all in the name of climate change and saving the planet. So, but now the UN has really said that they'd rather have unrealistic climate carbon removal schemes over other types of emission cuts, like Reggie. So the land required, they have now had this new report that they said the land required to meet all these new carbon emission schemes, how many trees we would have to plant, even though they're cutting them down, would put lands critical to the indigenous people and local farmers at risk, which they already did by building building up this city where they had the conference. An analysis of national climate plans at the COP30 warned that countries aren't following through with their plans, surprise, surprise, and that in order to do the carbon emission removal that we must do, they have to do unrealistic tree planting schemes. The Land Gap reports that was led by the University of Melbourne in another consortium of experts said that in order to achieve net zero emissions, which we know is sort of silly, they actually have to involve, that they want to involve protecting forests. You know what they're doing? They found out that the countries would have to devote just over 1 billion hectares of land that's larger than the size of Australia to meet their carbon removable targets. So the carbon emission plans that they had in place, people aren't following. They aren't doing it. And now the UN is saying, oh, we just need to plant more trees. Except planting more trees is also unrealistic. This co-author of the study said basically that they need to plant the trees to reduce to get us to the climate concerns. But this is only if countries meet their emission targets on time. So yet again, the UN has come up with a great solution to stop climate change, which doesn't even exist, by planting trees and displacing indigenous peoples. Man, oh man. It can't make this stuff up. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson, your host. You're watching The KJ Show with me, Dr. KJ, and I'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to easysense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's easysense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
And welcome back to the KJ Show with me, Dr. Katherine Johnson, your host on my new YouTube channel. And today I'm talking about something that's really interesting. Hasn't made the news as much as it should have, probably. But the solar industry is out. Nuclear energy and natural gas are in. And that's where the energy market is headed. Exactly the wrong place, exactly where the climate advocates don't want us to go. But the reason is the solar energy industry has finally collapsed. There was all kinds of challenges, and with higher interest rates, tighter financing, and of course, no more incentives for solar energy, there have been over 100 solar bankruptcies in 2024. And California was particularly hard hit because what they did is they got rid of their net energy metering, which made solar energy something that the customers could sell back to the power companies. Well, they made that they basically reduced the incentive for customers to put in solar PVs, so they stopped. So the solar bankruptcy is really becoming a problem. We have another graph about how many bankruptcies there's been in the solar industry. See, this is insane. I mean, it's been a really big deal, and it's going to continue because there's financing problems, there's plummeting demand, 80% decrease in installations overall. That's what happens when you put in policies that don't incentivize people. And while some of the stronger players are resilient, others are not being able to handle the debt, and are actually homeowners and solar employees have prolonged uncertainty. In fact, there's a law firm that specializes in what to do with these customers who bought solar PV under loans, and the loan company just went bankrupt. So this is because I think there's another graph as well that talks about the abandoned homeowners who thought they had a solar installation and they were paying for it, and all of a sudden it's not done, or it's done, or it's not even finished. And so these homeowners are being abandoned too, which is not a good look for the solar industry at all. The reason that they're having all these problems is because frankly, it's never been an economically viable choice, especially now given the current tariffs and also current interest rates and all kinds of things. But solar always relied on government rebates and incentives and tax credits, and those are gone. And that's not just in California, but there was another bankruptcy in North Carolina, which is Pine Gates Renewables filed for Chapter 11. This is a North Carolina-based developer that basically was behind operating more than 100 sites and 10 gigawatts of projects in the pipeline but now they're doing bankruptcy to stabilize them. They're financing. They said operations will continue during restructuring, backed by new financing, but they don't know what's going to happen with all the development projects in development, which is roughly 10 gigawatts. Their collapse comes months after policy turbulence, rising financing costs, and once seen as an independent standout developer is now going bankrupt. I think we have some other charts too. That they basically, so this kind of bankruptcy is because of the higher interest rates, the renewable energy funding is gone. Basically, the solar industry has experienced all kinds of problems. There's another one too, there's another one besides higher interest rates graph that we have. Yes, and this is really the critical thing. If it costs more to operate your business, you can't, and you're already not making money on it, of course you're going to go into bankruptcy. And these are some of the reasons that the solar industry companies are failing. They said that for Pine Gates Renewables, they have significant, basically saying there's legislative and regulatory challenges, and that has slowed the development of solar power. Yeah, when the government stops incentivizing you. High tariffs were also placed, and the elimination of tax credits, along with passing the big beautiful bill, all were contributing factors to the solar bankruptcy. Um, and then the other thing is, because Pine Gates is this renewable company is selling their assets, they're also going to cut jobs in North Carolina. They think about 17 to 20,000 jobs. And so when the solar industry contracts and there's a smaller number of contractors or developers or companies offering solar power, it's not going to become viable. It's really not going to survive. There's also borrowing challenges, and the smaller contractors are going out of business. And this isn't the first time that solar energy companies have had trouble. In California, they had a lot of bankruptcies when Solar City came along and tried to install solar everywhere and ended up going bankrupt, and a lot of homeowners got kind of taken by that. So the problem is that solar has never, ever, ever been cost effective, but it's been propped up for many, many years up by both Republican and Democratic institutions and administrations, only to realize finally, when you finally look at the real financing exercise that solar energy requires, it doesn't make sense. Never really did. It made a little bit of sense when you could sell your power back to the power companies, like in California, but that isn't allowed anymore. So why on earth would you invest in this very, not economic, profitable uh, uh, technology? Plus, in order for solar power to really work, you also need to have a really energy efficient home. So you have to have the energy efficiency in place before you even start about solar PVs. And a lot of people don't understand that. So you can never use solar to heat your entire home, because it's just impossible. You can use it to heat some of your home, but it's not going to be reliable all the time, and especially at night. And the solar batteries, which are good but are also expensive, don't last as long as the other stuff on the roof. So solar energy has always been, I think, a dream of these environmentalists, and they made a lot of money promoting solar back in the early 90s and 2000s. And I think it's finally reality is struck, that, if you keep propping things up, eventually someone's going to come along and say, that's not a really good idea. Why are we spending money on something that causes, that it doesn't work? Fundamentally, also, solar is one of the least environmentally friendly renewable technologies. And I've said this many times on my other show. Basically, in order to create a solar panel, which is not recyclable, by the way, you have to have rare earth minerals, which Trump is trying to find other sources in China and Africa. But you also have to have a lot of water. You use a lot of harsh chemicals. They're not, they don't last as long as they're supposed to last. They're not supposed to last. They're supposed to last 30 years. They maybe last 15. And then when they're done, they don't get recycled. They get shipped back to Africa, and in Africa, people trying to make a living will, try to get the precious minerals out and the gold and the silver that's embedded in the panels, in the same time also exposing themselves to toxic chemicals and diseases and illnesses. So I don't understand how solar ever got the idea that it was good for the environment. It isn't. And now finally we're realizing it's not good for the pocketbook either. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson, your host. You're watching the KJ Show with me, Dr. KJ, on my new YouTube channel, and I'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And welcome back to the KJ Show. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson, your host on my new YouTube channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. And today I'm talking about something that is sort of, I'm sure, perplexing my environmental friends. Solar renewable energy is basically out, and nuclear and natural gas are making a comeback. Why? Because they make economic sense, and they're also more reliable. So basically, Italy is sort of a good example of what happened. So after 3 Mile Island, everybody got scared, especially in Italy, and they decided to close all their nuclear power plants. Well, that wasn't exactly a good idea because now, in exchange for having nuclear energy, they had to rely on fossil fuels from other countries like Russia and all kinds of other places, and they prefer not to rely it on, Russia and other places. So they actually shut down. Italy shut down their reactors in 1990, but now the debate has come back to the forefront because guess what? Nobody wants to be buying stuff from Russia right now. There's a war going on, so they're confronted with the dual concerns of energy security and decarbonization. And so, what is the absolutely best fit for that? Going back to nuclear. Nuclear doesn't cause any carbon CO2 emissions. So the government now is revisiting the nuclear option, and this is the current government, Prime Minister, and the renewed interest reflects their growing concerns about their dependence on imported fossil fuels, something that I believe President Trump warned them about quite a few years ago. The urgency of meeting climate targets, which we'll see if they're going to be actually enforced, and this increased rising energy costs because renewable energy is expensive. So earlier this year, Italian government decided that they were going to actually start approving a law designed to pave the way for the return of nuclear energy. Spain is also rethinking their energy policies given their renewable energy outage that they had a few months ago. And now they're at the Spanish are actually saying, please don't shut down our nuclear power plants. Germany shut down their nuclear power plants and then had to restart them again. And France never did. France has been 97% nuclear for decades and has reliable energy it supplies to all across Europe, including Italy. So the heart of the Italy comeback for nuclear is something that I've talked about on a previous show called small modular reactors, or SMRs, or advanced modular reactors. These are not your father's power plants, if you want to put up that picture. They're not going to look like this. They're actually small, compact, much cheaper to build, and they can be deployed in a lot of different areas. And it's basically they're instrumental in decarbonizing what they think are energy intensive industries such as steel, glass, ceramics, and because renewable energy just can't generate the power needed for those industries. Um, but shutting down the nuclear power plant made Italy very dependent on imported fossil fuels, and they import most of its energy from natural gas from Algeria and Russia. And now they realize those are probably not reliable sources. Their dependence also exposes Italy to geopolitical risks and price volatility, which undermines economic stability, meaning they need to have a way to help their economy not, be so in such a whirlpool of concerns with rising energy costs. And they also want what every country wants: supply, stable supply. Something renewable energy is not. It is not stable. It is not reliable. And we don't have batteries big enough to capture it all, no matter what the environmentalists say. So abandoning nuclear energy for for has actually hurt Italy in a lot of different ways. First of all, it slowed their transition to a low carbon future, which may or may not be important, but other issues are more important. They said because nuclear power plants produces minimal greenhouse gas emissions and complements renewable sources, it was actually a way that they could maybe meet those aggressive European climate targets. But Italy has had to rely more on natural gas and coal, which I think is contrary to what the environmentalists want them to do, and delaying its decarbonization goals. Before its phase out, they were actually doing really well with those decarbonization goals. They had a combined net generating capacity about 14 megawatt hours, 1,400 megawatt hours, and they avoided about 50 to 60 million tons of CO2. But that all went backwards when they closed the plants and went back to natural gas and fossil fuels. Now, if decarbonization is really the goal, shouldn't nuclear energy be at the forefront? of this rather than shutting it down. Seems like they miscalculated, and they aren't the only ones. Italy's retreat also cost it valuable scientific and industrial expertise. And here's really the thing that happens when you have a nuclear power in your country, you also have a lot of really smart people working on it. And it creates all kinds of side jobs and offshoots and it attracts a technical and scientific community, which of course leads to better jobs, better wages, and frankly, advancing of scientific knowledge. They said the countries such as England, France, and Finland and South Korea have maintained strong nuclear energy programs, and they have technical leadership and high skilled employment, meaning they are better equipped they have a better standard of living. In contrast, Italy's withdrawal from the nuclear power led to a brain drain in its energy sector, resulting in a reliance of foreign innovation. And this is really ironic for the country where, they had so many interesting inventions, including, of course, Marconi and the radio. But, Italy has been known over the centuries for having a lot of really wonderful scientific knowledge. I mean, there's Rome as a starting point. But and the technical expertise they had to build Rome in those centuries ago. And they even had running water and they used oil for heat. I mean, it was olive oil for heating. I mean, it was just amazing how technologically advanced they were compared to, say, other countries around the world. And it's sad that somehow they bought into this argument that nuclear was bad and we needed to shut it down. Meanwhile, China never said nuclear was bad. China's all in. They have nuclear, they have coal, they have natural gas, they have solar, they have everything. And so, because they bought into this notion that we must decarbonize to save the planet, they ended up hurting themselves. And yes, we don't want to have pollution. I've said that many times, but there are better solutions than what they, by switching all of a sudden, think we can just switch 100% to renewable energy, which of course isn't exactly environmentally friendly, nor does it meet the needs the industry needs. Utilities work a lot with utilities and generation, electric utilities, reliable generation makes it or breaks it for them. If they have a peak outage, if they have too much demand, then they have to go up or they can't supply it, then they have to go on the market and pay enormous prices for kilowatt and megawatt hours. And that, of course, passes costs on to customers, and the regulatory commissions don't like that too much. So electric utilities live and die by their industrial customers, and they need to have a reliable supply of energy at all times. Nuclear provides that. And it's also long run a lot cheaper and certainly more, it's certainly better and safer than it ever was. So the answer is there's no surprise that nuclear energy is coming back. It should have never really gone away. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson, your host. You're watching The KJ Show with me, Dr. KJ, and I'll be right back.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk. Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
And welcome back to the KJ Show. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson on my new YouTube channel, and thanks for subscribing and listening. Today I'm talking about the fact that solar energy is out, nuclear and natural gas energy are back. And in the comments section, my friend John talked about how data centers are going to lead to the resurgence of nuclear energy. I swear he didn't know, but this topic was going to be the topic of energy talk, the fact that data centers are popping up everywhere. And basically, if you're on the right or the left, you hate them. And utility companies are being overwhelmed, and little towns are being overwhelmed. So data centers are a new unifying issue. Just about everybody hates data centers, which is a rare thing for most, no matter what your political persuasion is. And they hate them for different reasons, but it all comes down to the fact that they're putting up these massive amounts of equipment that require massive amounts of electricity in towns that don't have the infrastructure to support it. And the costs are being passed on to the customers, which doesn't seem fair at all. So basically, the MAG crowd and the Bernie bros have both figured out that they've been getting duped about data centers, according to Kerwin Olson, who is an executive director of the Citizens Action Coalition based in Indianapolis. And data centers is what brought them together. Who knew, right? They said that his organization has been running a campaign to persuade Indiana lawmakers to place a moratorium on new data centers and to redesign rates to protect residential customers from increases and related to data center development. Because you can't just put in a data center, you got to put in all the infrastructure, you got to put in the piping and the wiring, and it's a big deal, and it's very expensive to add new transmission lines or add new power. If anybody's ever had to pay for a line extension in their home, they know that it costs money to run a line, especially in a place where there wasn't maybe electricity before, because it was a farm field. Much of the discussion about data centers are large developments used to support cloud computing, artificial intelligence. But the underlying issues are broader, touching on the power of tech companies, and the people who live near the proposed data centers have to also have a sense of powerlessness, because these are coming up without their control. A lot of them there's been a backlash. And in fact, in some cities are pushing back, saying you can't put a data center in my town. It happened in Alabama. And the reason that these people both sides have united is because it's all about big tech, or the oligarchs are calling the shots, to quote Bernie. So Google decided not to install a data center in Indianapolis because local backlash organized by this man's group convinced residents to oppose it. They did the same thing in Northwest Indiana, Hobart, where they organized to oppose 2 data centers, raising concerns about the project's electricity and water consumption. That's the other thing. Data centers require an awful lot of water consumption. So the Public Utility Commissions of Ohio and others are now thinking maybe we need to redesign the electric rates that we charge data centers to recoup the costs and not pass it on to the customers. You can go ahead and put up the first picture. So this is how much states have. You can see all the different states. Virginia and California and Illinois and Texas and Ohio have quite a few. And if you go to the next chart, you'll see that this is how much energy they're using. This is where they are all over the country. And I think another chart shows their energy usage. Yeah. So look at all of this. Since 2010 to 2019, data center energy has started, increased along with the data center workloads, which are cloud computing and AI and internet traffic. So you can see it's just gone up exponentially. And this requires a lot of electricity and a lot of water. So the practical effect is that so basically the Public Utilities Commission in Ohio has said, if you want to put up a data center company, you have to actually assign a 12-year contract and pay new rates. And that will protect the customers in case you go bankrupt or your data center doesn't work. So that data centers that close or use less power than planned still need to pay the costs of their development, and which can shield other customers from covering the costs of lines and infrastructure. Florida Power and Light, another utility, has entered into a settlement with parties in a rate case that includes new rate categories, and this might be the answer, for large power users such as data centers. The rates would cover projects that reach 50 megawatts, and that's an awful lot of energy, with provisions regarding companies to pay even if they use less power. The Office of Public Counsel said it was still feasible or favorable to the companies, but still, it's a starting point. Delaware has also done something similar. The Public Service Commission staff there have requested Delmarva Power and Light develop a new rate design for large data centers and make sure that these large data centers are actually paying for the cost of the not only the electricity they're using, but also the cost to develop and deliver that. Um, Electricity. And that's what, it really harms residential customers. And especially if the data centers go belly up. And then what happens? Then you're left with this ugly thing in the middle of a farm field that costs an awful lot of money to use. And the electric companies thought they were going to get money, and they don't. So they end up having what they call stranded assets. So residential utility bills have continued to increase 6% on average, according to the Energy Administration. And the reason is because of data centers. They're often complex and very, but the point is that this is what the new governor-elect of Virginia ran on, writing to lower the costs, but she's also putting in data centers in Virginia. The tech communities and AI labs are building data centers that consume a gigawatt or more, equivalent to 800,000 homes. 800,000 homes. That's an incredible amount of electricity. And Virginia has the highest concentration of data centers. And the new governor, Abigail Spanberger, said she campaigned on the cost of living, even though she's in favor of data centers. Somehow that didn't come out, did it? Data centers, I love this quote. According to a researcher at Johns Hopkins University, data centers are not always good neighbors. Robert Frost would, I think, be pleased. They tend to be loud. They can be dirty. And there's a number of communities, particularly in places with really high concentrations of data centers, that just don't want more. And data center load growth is a primary reason for recent expected capacity market conditions, total forecast load growth, and tightened supply and demand. So basically what's happening is we have an increased demand for energy. We have an aging grid. Those two don't work together. And now we have not only these pushes for electrify everything, but we also have pushes to build more colossally consuming data centers, like build basically enough capacity for another 800,000 homes. The problem is we don't have the grid capacity to do it. And the tech companies aren't paying the full price of expanding their to extend the electricity out to the data centers, which are in generally rural areas that don't have a really good infrastructure to begin with. So at the end of the day, data centers may seem good on the surface, but not if we have a grid that can't even handle current demand, much less an exponential increase in demand. And data centers will lead to more need for electricity, hence, to John's point, more need for nuclear power. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson. You're watching the KJ Show with me, Dr. KJ, and I'll be right back.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. We discover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
And welcome back to the KJ Show. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson on my new YouTube channel. And today I'm talking about solar's out, nuclear and natural gas are in. And it's really been interesting to watch sort of the about face that's been happening in the energy industry. For example, Next Era Energy, which is a huge company, is close to acquiring Houston-based Symmetry Energy Solutions for $800 million. Symmetry is a natural gas provider. So Next Era Energy, which has been touted as having turbines and things, well, they're also going to rely on natural gas to supply the power. Backed by Energy Capital Partners, they've served 5,500 commercial industrial customers across 34 states and manage extensive gas and storage pipelines across the United States. So if you're a nuclear or if you're a company that supposedly put your game in on renewables, but now you're going to start buying up a gas pipeline supplier, what do you know that we don't? The deal would strengthen NextEra's role as an integrated energy supplier. It's known for its dominance in wind and solar, but the company has also started to invest in natural gas. Why? To support grid reliability. So even they figured out that you can't rely on wind and solar, and so they're buying up a natural gas supplier. Makes sense. It's a good corporate way to go. But that's not the only one. They're not the only ones figuring out that natural gas is not going to go anywhere. New York had, I have a graph on this. New York basically had been fighting a natural gas pipeline for years and years and years. But New York regulator, you want to put up the one with the natural gas pipeline? Yes. So New York has been fighting for years and years amongst itself, the legislatures and the political advocates, to not have a pipeline. But despite the concerns raised by the environmentalists, they're actually going to go ahead and just build another pipeline. And this is how it's going to benefit the New York area. The regulations approved include a water quality permit, and the Northeast Supply Enhancement Pipeline has really been a very sticking point with the climate activists who want to end the expansion of gas infrastructure. They also want to outlaw gas stoves in New York City and gas in restaurants. Not going to work. But this has been rejected 3 times, but now they're starting to see that maybe we need natural gas to meet this demand for energy in New York, in this area. The pipeline resurfaced after the Empire Wind offshore project went belly up. So they aren't going to get power from wind anymore. So what are they going to do? They're going to have to go back and rely on natural gas. That halted because Trump administration actually halted construction of the Empire Wind project. They needed to say, oh my goodness, what's our backup plan? Our backup plan is we got to build the pipeline we've been trying to build for years and years. So in the aftermath, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, who knows an awful lot about energy too, said that Governor Hochul will move forward on critical pipeline capacity. Now, Doug Bernstrom knows a lot about that because he was the governor of North Dakota, and he was also involved in the energy industry for quite a long time. So we actually have people who know things that are in charge of making these decisions. And within a month, they got back in the pipeline regulatory approval process and are now underway. Hochul, the governor, said, oh, I didn't make a deal with the White House, but she must have. Anyway, so the new project will extend an existing pipeline building off the coast of New Jersey and Staten Island to eventually connect existing pipes in Queens. And New Jersey also approved the pipeline. So it's happening on both sides. So, we've had that experiment with wind and solar. And it's taken about 30 years for people to understand that it just wasn't a really good idea ever. And that maybe what we should do is rely on our core technologies and rebuild our infrastructure, especially our grid, and both gas and electric utility infrastructure, because that is the backbone, literally, of our country. Without electricity and natural gas, we do not have a country that can, we're back in the Middle Ages, basically. But New Jersey and New York aren't the only ones that are rethinking their stance on natural gas. Exelon, which is a huge power company, headquartered in Philadelphia, I believe, but they have offices in all over, and it's just a very, very big company. They're also in Maryland, and they actually have asked the Public Service Commission, can we, the utilities, start generating electricity again? They want to reverse decades of deregulation and that was originally designed to say the grid operators shouldn't be generators, electricity producers. The plan asks lawmakers permission to build and own a new gas-fired power plant, arguing that state regulators would have to move control over prices and would have control over prices and more reliability, because the wind projects in Maryland haven't been very successful, and the current nuclear plants that they're relying on for electricity are really old and probably need to be shut down. Meanwhile, they use tons of coal. Train loads of coal come in every day from Pennsylvania and West Virginia to provide the power to generate electricity for Baltimore Gas and Electric. It's an amazing thing. So they're saying, well, maybe we shouldn't rely on coal, and maybe we should go back to natural gas. And why can't utilities generate electricity instead of being separated, which has led to increased costs? Obviously, the consumers' costs, all those people don't really want to. The consumer groups, the climate groups don't really in favor of this, even though it would make more economic sense for them. But lawmakers are split across party lines and concerned about reliability. The thing that I've understood, and Maryland, I used to live there, had a lot of issues with, and they've been promoting this all in electrify everything. They've now, instead of tracking energy savings for their programs, they're now tracking greenhouse gas emissions for programs. And they're really trying to force pretty much everyone in the state to switch to all electric, even though natural gas is available and cheaper and will create a lot of hardships for its low income customers. I know this because I do work and research on these particular topics for a number of states. But the thing that really bothers me is when I raised that concern, when I said, well, if you're forcing low income customers to switch from natural gas bills, which they can't pay their gas bill now, you're going to switch them to electric bills, and it's going to be 4 times higher. Well, they won't be able to pay them too. What do you do? And the advisory consultant who advises them, who's a very well-known consulting firm, said, well, that's a short-term problem. It isn't a short-term problem for the customers who can't pay their bills. And it's a long-term problem when you try to basically upend the entire infrastructure for an entire state and end up costing more than it should. And so the vulnerable people are getting left behind again, and the Maryland ratepayers are going to end up having to pay more and more to cover people who can't afford to pay their electric bills or their gas bills. It's just insane. And this is one of the reasons I get really angry when I talk about electrification, because doesn't make sense in a lot of cases. So I'm glad that they're finally figuring out natural gas is part of the equation, and natural gas utilities are actually very good partners, much better than tech companies. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson. You're watching the KJ Show with me, Dr. KJ, and I'll be right back.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
And welcome back to the KJ Show with me, Dr. Katherine Johnson, your host on my new YouTube channel. And I always like to end my shows with some fun stuff. And since Thanksgiving's coming up, I thought it'd be fun to talk about some energy issues related to Thanksgiving and some little known facts. The average Thanksgiving dinner amounts to 4,000 calories, which is the equivalent of the energy needed to power a small appliance for the day. So all the energy it takes to cook all those wonderful things in your Thanksgiving table could probably power your toaster or your microwave. And then turkey obviously is the most popular dish, with 46 million being consumed, except for the 2 that get pardoned every year. Cooking a Thanksgiving meal can generate enough heat to warm your kitchen, reducing heating costs, which I've always found was interesting too. And it's not really that surprising. And the energy used for cooking can be minimized if you use a slow cooker. Well, I don't think so, or a microwave instead of an oven. I'm an old-fashioned person. I like my turkey roasting away after I brined it for 3 days in an oven. But they do encourage an energy tip. They do encourage to store leftovers in energy-efficient containers and reduce food waste. The another big thing about pardoned turkeys was actually it was Abraham Lincoln was the first president who actually started pardoning the Thanksgiving turkey. And it was because his son Tad, who later sadly died, had asked him to please not murder the turkey that they were going to have for Thanksgiving at the White House. So that became the tradition. And so years later, presidents, both sides, have always had this really kind of funny ritual of pardoning 2 turkeys. They always have fun names too. They basically are Peach and Blossom. And this year it was George Bush pardoned Marshmallow and Yam. That was the first 2. And you know where the pardoned turkeys were sent? They were sent to Disney World because then they became mascots in the Disney Thanksgiving parade. And now, of course, Disney has Animal Kingdom. They have a lot of good places and they have wild lands that they control. So a lot of pardoned turkeys ended up in Disney. I had no idea. And other fun facts are that one town, I'm going to put the next one. One town actually postponed Thanksgiving because they couldn't have their pumpkin pie. Pumpkin pie, or actually my daughter makes a killer pumpkin cheesecake. That's my favorite. But basically in 1705, townspeople of Colchester, Connecticut were so dedicated to the dessert that they elected to postpone the holiday because the foul weather had interrupted their molasses shipment. And without molasses, they couldn't make pumpkin pie or rum for that matter. And so the Thanksgiving just wouldn't be the same. My kind of people. And this was 1705. I mean, Thanksgiving was just basically still a brand new holiday in America. The other fun thing about Thanksgiving, which I didn't realize, and I always kind of wondered how Jingle Bells was a Christmas carol. Turns out it isn't. It's a Thanksgiving carol. It was developed by James Lord Pierpont, who wrote Jingle Bells so it could be performed by his father's Sunday school class on Thanksgiving. So Jingle Bells is Thanksgiving. We can start singing Jingle Bells early now with Thanksgiving. I always wondered why it was a Christmas carol, maybe because it had a sleigh ride, but no worries. So I do think it's fun that we take a moment, and frankly, Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays because it really gives us a time to pause and be grateful and be gracious and be happy for all the blessings we have, both in America and around the world. So happy Thanksgiving early, and I'll see you next week. You've been watching the KJ Show with me, Dr. KJ, and I'll be back next week with a really interesting episode about saving water saves energy. Have a great week. Bye.
This has been The KJ Show. Tune in next week as Catherine shares her insights to current changes in the energy industry while drawing on her experience as an energy efficiency consultant for the past 30 years. Right here on The KJ Show.